and welcome back to my channel. Today I am talking about the books that I actively chose not to read in 2020. Okay, most of the content creators that I know, whether it's Bookstagram, book bloggers, Booktube, any of that, tend to track the books that they read. Whether they do that through Goodreads or a different app, they have some way of either knowing how many pages, how many books, how many hours they've put in to reading. I decided to be extra and also track the books that I didn't want to read. Actively chose not to read those books. And then I thought, even better, I'll do a video explaining to you why I chose not to read them. Now, this is not me saying that you can't read these books or that you shouldn't read these books. You might love these books. You might, who knows? So I want this to be, positive, if at all possible, but I appreciate that there may be one of your favourites on this. I don't really do controversial content, really. Anytime I've been like, ooh, hot take, it's tepid at best. But some of the books that I'm going to be talking about in this video are controversial, have been controversial, and will continue to be controversial. So emotionally, I'm preparing for that. Let's talk about the book. Some of these came out this year. I think most of these came out this year, actually. And some of them I chose not to read, even though they came out the year before or whatever. But these are books that have been talked about. They've been in conversations on Twitter, on Booktube, but I chose not to read them. Now, I know there is the anti-TBR tag going around. I think I've been tagged in it, but I wasn't convinced that I was actually going to be able to fit these books into the prompts. Yeah, so the first book that I chose not to read was American Dirt. This was a mess. This is what this was. So I first heard about American Dirt probably in January, and people were talking about how it was going to be like the Booker Prize winner, and it was going to be a New York bestseller, and it was going to be incredible, and it was fantastic because it was own voices, and it was looking at a migrant's experience coming from Mexico to America, and it was going to be this really gritty, powerful response to something that is very topical and important and developing all the time. And then it turned out wasn't own voices, and that angered a lot of people. Don't call it own voices if it isn't own voices, was the issue that I had. For me, own voices is I am born and bred and breathed this my entire life. This is my own experience that I have then translated into fiction or non-fiction or poetry, whatever. Research and second-hand experience can make for a very good book, but it does not make it own voices. In January there was just so much controversy going on anyway, and then we had the riots, and then the world just ended this year. It was a trash start to what would be a trash year, and I chose not to read it. I just thought the idea of having false own voices as part of a marketing campaign was really shitty. I then saw some reviews that included the stereotypes that were included in this book, and it just, even without all the controversy and stuff that led up to it, the fact that it was badly written and leaned on stereotypes a lot, it was frying pan fire kind of stuff. So that was the first one that this year, in fact that was the book that made me go, you know what, I'm going to see how many books this year I have that physical reaction to and decide not to read. American Dirt. Yeah, American Dirt was the first one. A Heart So Fierce and Broken. Very different reason. I really didn't enjoy A Curse So Dark and Lonely. I know that a lot of my friends really like it. It caught me at a bad time, A Curse So Dark and Lonely, because I had already read 2 Beauty and the Beast retellings. And 2 is too many in 1 year for me. I like a retelling, don't get me wrong, but not the same retelling. And oh my god, there were so many Beauty and the Beast retellings. Just couldn't anymore. So I didn't really enjoy it for that reason. I also didn't think that the disability repped, if that makes any sense. I feel like, well, she has a disability that a lot of people have but there isn't a lot of information on, that there isn't a lot of representation of, if any. I can only think of, when I think of like cerebral palsy, I can only think of that Rosie comedian. That's the only person I can think of that has that representation. And so I kind of had that reaction to begin with. Then I read recently Get a Life Chloe Brown. Now in Get a Life Chloe Brown she has fibromyalgia, which is chronic pain. She also has kind of anxiety disorders and things like that, and I thought the rep in that was great because even though it's there, she has this thing that she has to think about, that she has to consider. When she doesn't think or consider it, you don't necessarily notice it to the story, but it has consequences. Whereas I felt like the disability rep in A Curse So Dark and Lonely, it was only there to suit the plot in those situations. It wasn't constant, it wasn't, I just didn't feel like it was very good rep. I know I'm not the person to decide that. I know that there may be people with cerebral palsy that think it's great rep, and I'd love to be, you know, I would love for someone to come along and say, actually Hannah, you don't have experience in this, you don't know that actually this is fantastic rep and that is how it is. But I just felt like it was such a mediocre plot device. I think it's the fact that I felt it was a plot device was kind of the thing for me. The fact that it didn't feel like a really important facet of her personality, of her characterization, just a silly plot device. So when the second one came out, I know that a lot of people were really excited for it. A lot of people said that it was better than the first one. Wasn't going to give it the time of day. Once I'd read that first one and just kind of been so disappointed, I didn't need to read the next one. I'm going to skip ahead to Blood and Honey. Blood and Honey is obviously the second book of Serpent and Dove. I hated Serpent and Dove. The only reason I finished Serpent and Dove is because I did it as an audiobook. There was absolutely no way I was spending money on Blood and Honey. It wasn't happening. And so those two books were just, they were sequels that came out this year to books I did not enjoy and was not going to put my money behind. The Ballad of Songs and Snakes. Now, I love The Hunger Games. The release date of this came out the same time that we found out about Midnight Sun, and I decided quickly that I was also not going to spend money on Midnight Sun. I am not interested in reading from the perspective of an entitled white man. That's not going to add a perspective that I give a shit about. No, I'm not interested in how Snow came to power. The Shadows Between Us. Now, I got really excited when I first heard about this book. I was really intrigued by the front cover. I was intrigued by the premise. And then all the reviews came out. And they were not positive. The ones, like, well, okay. So the ones that were positive were from creators that I like watching their content, but I'm not necessarily going to take their advice on books to read. The people that I do trust and do, like, I have taken books from their TBRs and been like, I've really enjoyed this kind of thing. Really didn't like it. Really didn't like it. And it got so much hype, and it just, I don't think I've heard anyone say anything positive about it for about 6 months. I think people were really excited for it when it first came out, and people who got arcs for it and things like that were very positive about it, but when buyer reviews came in, that dropped. And by that point I was like, no, they don't get my money either. Chain of Gold, I could not be less interested in Cassandra Clare at this point. How many books does the woman need? Now, I appreciate that I am doing a reread of Meg Cabot and she has 62 books, but at least Meg Cabot's series stop at like 13 books. That's the most she's ever got. Like, how many books? Then she's got her spin-off series. Now she's got this. Chill your beans. Just chill it. I don't remember what happens after book 4. I don't want to have to reread the whole thing. I'm sorry, Cassandra Clare. Lots of people love your writing. I'm not your girl. I'm not you. You're not getting my money. Stop writing. Let someone else have a go. Sorry, not sorry. Notorious Virtues. So I chose not to read this one because I really didn't like Rebel in the Sands. And at the time I didn't really like Rebel in the Sands because I thought the pacing and the plot and the characters were all shit. And then it turns out that that was another one where it was kind of appropriated mythology as opposed to kind of respected and appreciated by the author. So that was a weird one. I didn't really like Rebel in the Sands, and then everything else I heard about it after I'd read it made it worse. So wasn't going to spend any more money on the author that wrote that. The Beautiful and the Damned. The Beautiful had such a bad response from from reviewers that I trust that it just wasn't interested. And I think the one thing that really got me is a lot of people were like, oh, it's a vampire book, vampires are coming back. And then I was talking to someone about it and I was like, oh, like I've heard really bad things, I've heard it's not worth my time. And she was like, it could not decide if it was a murder mystery or a vampire book, and then at the end the vampires are in it for like 2 minutes. What's the point? So these are the two that I think I might lose friends over. I have no interest in reading Daisy Jones and the Six or The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I couldn't tell you why. I've a complete disinterest in that kind of almost historical fiction contemporary genre. I don't know. It has just, whatever interest and intrigue has just completely passed me by. And it might be one of those ones where I've seen it so much and it's been so hyped that I just don't care. Actively chose not to read those this year. Not interested. Couldn't get me to read them if you paid me. Rebel Rose was another Beauty and the Beast retelling. Like I said, 2 was enough. Now, I'm going to put in Robert Galbraith and the Ickabog. I am not going to spend money on J.K. Rowling ever again. I don't need to. I have been kind of cleansing myself. I've been slowly getting rid of all my stuff that I have that's Harry Potter related, except for my original Harry Potter books. So I don't have any of the newer editions. I don't have any of the like swanky new hardbacks or the Hufflepuff editions or anything like that. I never bought a wand. I had some Harry Potter-y t-shirts and things like that, but binned those. J.K. Rowling is not having any more of my money. I would never say that I'm an authority on anything except myself, and even then that is sketchy. But if a lot of people tell you that you are hurting them emotionally, physically or mentally, you have a responsibility to listen to that. To then write essay upon essay and Guardian article after Guardian article arguing that you are in the right, go yourself. And the last book is Cape May. Now, even if the genre was of interest to me, the snippets that came out, what even is this book? The descriptions of the women are just beyond sexist and misogynistic. It uses racism, and then the argument was that it was to make it culturally accurate. Doesn't need to happen. It's 2020. Why are we still using racist slurs in our fiction to prove a point? We know that historically we've been racist. Presently, people are still being racist. So how about we don't encourage them by including that in our writing? Wouldn't that be a fun, novel idea? I think I managed to rein in the vitriol. I feel like, for the most part, it was just disinterest. But there were a few that got under my skin, and therefore I actively chose not to read them. Let me know in the comments below what books you actively chose not to read, and if I've missed a book that you think needs commenting on, you let me know. Other than that, I hope it's sunnier where you are and that you have a nice day.